Fostering Leadership is made possible by the generous donations of the Foster Foundation and Artie and Sue Bird.
I'm Nick Perleros, your host for Fostering Leadership. Each week, we're going to challenge you to think creatively about leadership. We'll tackle a new idea in a different way, and always with many points of view. We'll explore lessons from history to gain perspective and expose the concept of leadership in a new light. Foster Business School students will take us out of the classroom and into the field in search of inspiration and learning. We'll engage intellectually with business leaders, exploring a wide and deep world of provocative thought. Watch the show, get inspired, and then visit our website to match wits with business leaders, students, and faculty, and learn a ton of stuff. Okay, let's get started. What pops into your head when you hear the word leadership?
Leadership is about preparing an organization for change.
A good leader is someone who's compassionate.
It's getting somebody to the point where they believe they can actually do the thing that you've been coaching them to do without you doing it.
Leadership is stepping into an opportunity and being willing to take people along with you.
I think leadership is the ability to motivate and inspire people.
A good leader has to have a big vision.
Accountability,
honesty,
personability,
and the willing to take a risk.
Kind of lead by example. I think what you do speaks louder than what you say.
It's about creating a picture of the future and helping people figure out what role they can play in getting there.
You have an open mind, that you know that the possibilities are endless, and God only knows what's going to happen tomorrow.
So, most people expect leadership to be about the leader. They mention the attributes or traits of a leader are what make that person able to lead. These things are important, of course, but we're going to look at leadership from a different premise. We're going to consider the situation as key to the birth or success of a leader. How do circumstances, be they historical, political, or personal, create leadership opportunities? And why do some leaders perform well no matter what the situation, and others aren't always the best fit? Opportunity, courage, conviction. These words describe University of Washington alum Robert Khoo, who single-handedly transformed an obscure gaming comic strip into a media empire.
I was very much a hardcore gamer. On my resume, after graduating from UW, the last line for every one of my resumes was 1988 Nintendo World Championship semifinalist. Started at Penny Arcade through a very, unorthodox means. One of my clients was a game developer and in South Korea, and I have been reading this Penny Arcade strip. It was a comic strip online, and it was done by two guys out of their apartment, essentially. Decided I was going to reach out to them as far as trying to develop a marketing strategy with them for my particular client. Had lunch with them, realized they had no idea what they were doing. The way that they thought of it was that they were entertaining themselves. And if they entertained themselves, then that's all they really cared about. I don't think they really realized what they were really doing was creating content. And when you create content, all of a sudden you are working with media. And so instead of two guys in an apartment, you start looking at models like MTV or CNN or any of these companies that create content and how they monetize it. I stepped away thinking, oh my God, what are these guys doing? Do they know what they're really sitting on? 45 days later, I had come to the realization that I was young, I was going to make my move at some point in time, and if I was going to do it, this seemed like an incredible opportunity because it was just a matter of time that I felt that these guys were just going to blow up. So I scheduled another lunch, sat down, and I gave them a 60-page business plan. I said, hey, look, no matter how this meeting goes, this is yours. With my experience, I feel that I see a real opportunity here. I would love to be the guy that executes this plan, and so you just give me the green light and I will quit my job and I will work for you for free for 2 months. And if I can pay for myself after 2 months, great, keep me. If I cannot pay for myself, cut me. And that was 8 or 9 years ago now. Penny Arcade is a comic strip that is released online Monday, Wednesday, Friday. At its core, a gaming political cartoon. So if you are not really in the know, if you are not within the industry, if you're not an incredibly hardcore gamer, you will not understand this, and that's perfectly fine with us. We know our audience, we stick to it. It seems to be a large enough audience to support us. Like, I knew I was always going to end up in the game industry. I didn't quite understand that I was going to make this kind of impact.
History is full of examples of people who became leaders by circumstance or chance, succession, or even proximity. Call it fate, right place, right time, or just the natural order of things. Many of our greatest leaders weren't looking for opportunity when it found them anyway.
Katherine Graham showed an early interest in publishing. She wrote for her school paper, studied journalism in college, and worked summers at the Washington Post, which just happened to be the family business. In 1941, Katherine married Philip Graham, a Harvard Law grad and a Supreme Court clerk. After serving in the Army, Graham joined the Washington Post as associate publisher, at the invitation of Katherine's father, Eugene Meyer, who eventually sold the company to the Grahams for $1. Philip Graham grew the company to include television and radio stations, as well as Newsweek magazine. During this period, Katherine largely played the roles of doting mother, dutiful wife, and DC matron. She had devoted her life to raising children and entertaining politicos and pundits, putting aside her own career and ambitions. In 1963, after years of battling depression, Phil Graham committed suicide. So like it or not, ready or not, and amidst her grief, Katherine Graham became president of the company she now owned, on her own. What she may have lacked initially in confidence, she more than made up for with inquisitiveness and savvy. Katherine asked unending questions of the brightest minds around. She insisted on bringing top talent to the Post, at top salaries, to improve the quality and station of the paper. One of her first hires was managing editor Ben Bradley. Katherine Graham became a driven leader, determined to not only maintain the paper, but to build its influence and importance, as well as its profit. And build it she did. In the early 70s, the Washington Post was making news as well as reporting it. In a fight that went all the way to the Supreme Court, the Post won the right to publish the Pentagon Papers, a classified study of U.S. military involvement in Vietnam. Not long after, the Post's Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein wrote a series of articles on the Watergate break-in. The articles revealed criminal activity which led to 40 indictments and the resignation of President Richard Nixon. Katherine Graham had become the most powerful woman in publishing. Her paper was roundly regarded as one of the 2 best in the country. For 10 years in a row, under her watch, the Washington Post grew its annual profit by 20% or more. Heads of state sought her company, and politicians the world over sought her favor. She was described as a forceful and courageous publisher and a formidable presence. She hadn't gone looking for opportunity, but when it found her, she grabbed it with both hands. Katherine Graham's memoir, Personal History, won the Pulitzer Prize in 1998. She passed away in 2001 at the age of 84. Stay tuned for more of Fostering Leadership.
At the University of Washington's Foster School of Business, the topic of leadership is front and center. For Bruce Avolio, the director of the Center for Leadership and Strategic Thinking, studying leadership has been a lifelong passion. We had the chance to sit down with Bruce for this very first segment of Q&A, and we learned a lot. Bruce, you've been observing leaders over the course of your academic career. What's your primary observation?
Well, I guess one of the things that really surprised me about leaders and leadership was how much the situation matters. It matters a lot. What you come to see is that if they're not in the right situation, oftentimes at the right time, it doesn't work. The CEO of BP, people would say, British Petroleum would say, you know, before the Gulf disaster, he ran a really tight ship, no pun intended. And then the crisis hit, and it was like he was completely out of his context. Now, maybe he wasn't developed for that. Maybe he didn't have the right coaching, or maybe the situation just overwhelmed him. So I've really learned over time that you got to look at the situation, and leaders have to prepare themselves for the advent of a completely different situation that they might not expect that they're going to have to lead in.
What happens when you throw leaders into situations that are fundamentally different than their career experiences?
Well, we get a lot of leadership car crashes, so to speak, where they kind of hit the wall and they're trying to apply a completely different perspective that they've had that worked, and they apply it to a new situation and it doesn't work at all. And so some of them fall by the wayside. Others will come to that situation and do things that we've learned through research and observation. They will assess the situation, get what we'd call situational awareness. What's going on around me? What's different? Talk to people, observe what's going on. And then once they have that, and along with that, delaying judgment, not coming in with a judgment that they would have done in the past or used a different criteria from the past, but look at what the situation warrants and come to a conclusion of what they need to do.
So what does it take for leaders to be successful during these kinds of changes?
First thing that comes to mind, suspend judgment. Because if your judgment is based upon what worked in the past, it may not work in the present or future. That's number one. Number two, be willing to listen hard to what people have to say. There are people around you that will know the situation you're going into that you may not realize what they know, and you've got to uncover what they know. Three, you've got to engage them in that conversation and make them feel comfortable that you don't know all of the challenges or the directions, and they can be very useful in helping you to get through that, particularly the early phases. When you really don't know, even if you're in the role as the leader, you can't lead without them providing you input.
Bruce, how would you define leadership?
I spent 30 years on that one. Well, first of all, when you add the ship to the word leader, I immediately think of a process. Leadership is about getting people, I think, willingly to a goal that they want to accomplish. I mean, simple as that. And that the leader is trying to influence that process, and oftentimes the follower is taking an active role in that. The better the leader, the more active the follower will be in that process.
So what makes a leader?
People like to look at leaders as born or made, and it's really that there is evidence. We have done research showing that probably 30% of what we say is leadership in somebody comes from heritability, the energy you get from your genetic makeup, intelligence, things like that. The 70% come from your friendships, your mentors, your peers, your challenges, your first job.
What is it about the first job?
The first job you have is critical, oftentimes, to predicting who becomes successful as leaders or not. The training program, whether you happen to be in the military, whether you were a Boy Scout or Girl Scout, whether someone picked you up and said, you know what, I see potential in you and I'm going to mentor you because I want to bring the leader out in you. What if you just walked by that person and never met them? Would you have become that leader?
Many corporations and not-for-profits need help recruiting senior management and board members for their organizations. Our next story takes us into the world of a headhunter. The executive search business is all about identifying the right person for a specific opportunity.
I like to be able to help organizations with their most important asset, which is their people.
Meet Shelley Jones, executive recruiter. We think you'll find her perspective on leadership good food for thought.
It's important to remember that in the executive search profession, your inventory are human beings. And they're not precise things. They're not machines. So what you're trying to do is find the right person to be in the right role and be effective at it. I think there are probably multiple answers to defining leadership. A lot depends on the situation involved in the context of the opportunity. Multiple styles come into play here. How a person exemplifies the leadership. Sometimes it could be the Sergeant York, follow me over the trenches kind of leadership. And sometimes it can be the General Eisenhower working behind the scenes leadership. And I think it's predominantly dependent upon the circumstances in which the person's been thrust to exert the leadership and the style that they choose to use to do it. Leadership is kind of an ephemeral topic. It can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. The first element that I respond to is, does this person have a basic instinct to know that that is their role, if not obligation, to be in the point, if you will? Do they have a self-awareness about themselves? The second thought of that is the person has to acknowledge that there are other people. That this is not a leadership of one, it's a leadership of many. And they are absolutely instinctive issues. There's nothing analytically that you could draw up on a piece of paper and say this makes a leader. If you're looking for a chief financial officer, chief executive officer, chief marketing officer, whatever the role might be, member of the board, you are always looking for a composite of skills. The second broad set of questions, and that becomes the appraisal piece, is how do you expect that person to flourish or not in the organization that has hired me to find this role? Because each organization may be considerably different in terms of how they manage themselves, what the culture is about, how they strategize their future. So in this context, you may be able to find multitudes of people who have the appropriate skill set, and there only may be one person who can effectively work in that organization.
Coming up next is The Desk. Business leaders Richard Tate of Boom Boom Brands and Phyllis Campbell of JP Chase share their personal experiences and views on the topic When Opportunity Knocks.
Well, welcome to The Desk. Today's topic is When Opportunity Knocks, and often it can be situational. The situation matters. Phyllis, do you have a perspective?
Well, I think it's a great subject, and one of my favorite subjects, only because I think if I look at my own personal career, I've had several examples where doors have opened, doors have closed, but it is about opportunity and maybe stepping into those opportunities. I had a boss early on that told me, get ready, and I used to say, get ready for what? And he'd say, I don't know, just get ready. And I really began to realize that as I've changed careers several times in the last number of years, going from banking, a long career there, into running the Seattle Foundation, which was a nonprofit, and then going back into corporate life when Washington Mutual failed. And it really was a door that was unexpected, that closed for the community, but in many senses open for JP Chase, and then me to come back in and really to help rebuild an institution here. So it was a door that was totally unexpected. It was a situation that occurred. It was unfortunate, but it did create that opportunity, and I was able to step through the door. So that get ready really came home for me.
Often it's when a door that closes that another opportunity represents itself, and I think that analogy of being ready to step forward is so true.
Absolutely.
In my life, it's a little bit different. Often I don't wait for the opportunity to present itself. I'm going to push and try and create that opportunity
Well,
for
I did
myself.
want to ask you about that because I've been an admirer of yours for years as a wonderful entrepreneur in the community, and of course your first big success, Cranium, is a company I know well, so I'd love to hear about that.
Well, it's one of those family-oriented stories of where we were on vacation with another couple, Dan and Maggie, and I have a little antenna that goes off, an empathetic antenna, and that's how I look for opportunities, is to see where people might need something new. And in this particular case, it was a rainy Sunday. We'd read the newspaper and flicked through the books, and Dan and Maggie challenged us to a game of Pictionary. We've never been beaten at Pictionary. We're unbelievable. And sure enough, we mastered them at Pictionary, and they immediately challenged us to a game of Scrabble, which they won handsomely. And as I sat there, I wondered, why isn't there a game that has something in it for everyone, that gives everyone the chance to shine? My little antenna went off. And from that moment, I started to sketch out on a napkin what such a game would be like, and partnered with my buddy, Whit Alexander, and ultimately created the game that sold millions of copies worldwide.
And we're all thankful for that. It was a terrific game.
But in that moment, when opportunity knocked, I stepped forward and on a simple napkin started to create the prototypes. We'd hide behind people's couches and watch them play the games.
That's great.
But it was the courage to take that first step.
Fantastic.
When opportunity knocks, here are the takeaways from The Desk. First and foremost is to seize that opportunity, have the courage, step forward, and take calculated risks.
And get ready.
That's it from The Desk.
Thanks for joining us.
Stay tuned for more of Fostering Leadership.
You may have heard the expression pay it forward, which usually describes the repayment of a good turn to others. We think of mentorship in this light, and we know that these mentor-mentee relationships have the potential to impact a mentee, especially with regard to the topic of leadership. Pay It Forward will be an ongoing feature on our show that shares these stories of mentorship.
The mentorship program pairs MBA students with experienced business people. Leaders who bring their unique perspectives to bear on issues and questions the students face as they go through their studies and plan their future. In his second year at the Foster School, Aaron Panzer teamed up with Howard Behar, the former president of Starbucks Coffee.
I first met Howard at the business school, and there were 5 people in my group.
There's this tall kid comes walking into the room, right? And
Howard just welcomed us with a great smile.
I always asked the first question, and I said, okay, what do you want to get out of this? Aaron just came out with a lot of energy and passion about what he wanted, and he was humble about it. He had a twinkle in his eye.
When do you start thinking about an advisory committee?
I think right now. I wouldn't wait. And the earlier you get that done, the better off you're going to be. You want an entrepreneur on that advisory committee, someone that's been through what you're going through, and that can talk to you about all the rocks in the road.
When I was in school, I was very focused on going to the energy business. So if you looked at my resume, if you would have asked, okay, why choose Howard Behar as your mentor?
What do you mean?
It really wouldn't make sense. But I thought to myself, how can I really get the most out of this opportunity? Who would be a great person to be able to have a conversation with and get advice from? Everything pointed to Howard in this situation. I'm really interested in creating my own business, being at the foundation of something unique and having ownership over it, driving it forward.
You got to be thinking about the dream.
Yeah.
What is it you're trying to accomplish here? What does it look like out in the future? What is success?
I'm more of a creative person, a visionary as well, as far as where I think that this company is going to go.
You ought to be starting to write that down, in essence, painting a picture in words about your organization, about your business and what you're trying to do.
One of the most important things that he's really drilled into me was just to listen. Listen to the people around you. He said it a million times. It's not about the coffee. It's about the people.
Nothing excites me more than to hear about what he's doing. That really makes a difference in my life. I just love it.
Coming up next, our business leader feature story. This week, we spend time with Erik Nordstrom of the Nordstrom Company, a 4th-generation family member of this publicly owned company. With the job of growing Nordstrom's presence in the top markets and best retail centers around the U.S., Erik shares his thoughts about leadership and a simple formula for success.
I just really enjoyed being part of a team, part of something that could accomplish things much more than I could by myself. In 1901, my great-grandfather and his partner Carl Wallen started a shoe store in downtown Seattle. I've been doing this since one way or another since I was 12 years old. Well, my first job in management was one of our Southern California stores, and I was fresh out of the University of Washington, and while I had been selling shoes through school, I wasn't full of confidence that I had a lot of expertise to direct my team. There's people who've been selling shoes longer than I had been alive. What they want is to be supported, is to be respected for their opinion. For me as a leader, my role was to help them do their jobs better, help them achieve their goals of taking care of their customers. I found that to be very liberating. Leadership for our company is about delivering great service to the customer. We have to value the customer and the connection the customer has with our company as the most important interaction that happens in our company. So therefore, we view the people that interact with the customer as the most important jobs in our company. So our structure's described as an inverted pyramid, with customers on top, those that deal with the customers next, and management's below them supporting. There is no rule book. During our new hire training, we pass out and we say, okay, here's our rule book, and it's a postcard, and it says, Rule 1, use good judgment in all situations, and that's it. Our reputation for service is a fragile thing. It's still our people on the front line that determine our reputation, therefore determine our success. So to create a great place for customers to shop, we first and foremost have to create a great environment for people to work. I don't know how you have an environment where customers want to come and shop and are happy and want to spend time there if the workers are all grumpy and can't wait to get home. It's something that's very, very linked for us. Our company's not for everyone. Our culture is a great fit for many, and for some it's not. The best leaders create an environment where high performers, people with high standards, want to be part of the team. You gotta have people that are charged up, are motivated by having that autonomy. Everything else is just a means to the end. The end is taking care of the customer. Our number one goal is give great customer service, and that's our number one goal this year. It was our number one goal last year. It was when I was a salesperson, and it will be next year.
So, you want to be a leader? Let's find out what you've learned and what you think you know. Because our show originates at the University of Washington and we're working with many faculty members from the Foster School of Business, it was a no-brainer to end our show with a quiz.
Go to our website, take our quiz, and see how you do. Although many individuals have argued that leaders are born rather than made, research evidence accumulated over the last 10 years indicates experience is more predictive of ascendance into leadership positions than heredity. True or false? The types of leaders who will be successful in the future will encompass a significantly broader range of qualities than we have seen in the past. True or false? Evidence has shown that there are really no common characteristics that are associated with successful leadership. True or false? Go to our website, take our quiz, and see how you do. Each week we'll have a new quiz on leadership based on the theme of our show.
Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. Next week, we'll continue our investigation into the topic of leadership. Is there such a thing as a born leader? Where does leadership come from? Is there a genetic component or strictly environmental influences? How can we best teach leadership? We'll look at these ideas through the lens of a variety of businesses and business leaders. All the stories offer many points of view, from a small family winery in Eastern Washington to one of the nation's largest retailers, from a family-run newspaper business to a world-famous fish market. All these stories and more when we see you next week for Fostering Leadership.
Fostering Leadership was made possible by the generous donations of the Foster Foundation and Artie and Sue Burke. To find out more about Fostering Leadership, go to our website, uwtv.org/fosteringleadership.